excited tonight, folks. We've got Jason Deskins on with us tonight. And Jason is a Detroit guy through and through. We got a lot to talk to him about. We want to cover a lot of things with him. Let me get him on. Let's say hi. Let's get rolling. Jason, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Youngstown general manager. I don't even think you've got the general manager title now. Didn't you bump that title up?
So I'm actually the co-GM. So I have myself and Rosecki, and then I'm vice president of hockey operations as well with Youngstown.
What are the different roles there?
So obviously for the GM side, it's more personnel based in terms of scouting, day-to-day personnel with our active roster, our affiliates, trades, waiver wire, all that good stuff from the GM side. But we're pretty heavily involved with our coaching staff on a day-to-day basis, our training staff on a day-to-day basis, but it's more personnel driven based on kind of where we're at today and where we're looking to go in the future. The hockey operations side, it's kind of nice because I'm involved with Black Bear Sports Group on a more whole level within the organization as opposed to just Youngstown as well. So we're involved with our camps, from our futures camps to our main camps. And then we work with our junior programs as well in Maryland, also in Mercer as well, and then even have some impact on the youth side for Black Bear Sports Group.
So you mentioned a company, Black Bear. Most people probably aren't familiar with the name, and most people don't understand the depth of what Black Bear does. Can you kind of give us a shorter, condensed version of what the company does and where junior hockey fits in with the company?
Sure. Cliff Notes version, Murray Gunty, based out of Bethesda, Maryland, is Black Bear Sports Group, and Murray's the owner of Black Bear Sports Group. Murray used to be in the business finance sector, got to a point where he wanted to find and build a company as opposed to acquiring and selling companies.
Right.
Started buying hockey arenas. So Black Bear is the largest operator of hockey arenas all along in the United States, but predominantly on the East Coast, and then starting to move more towards the Midwest as well. And then they own junior programs on top of that and tournament series as well. So it's a pretty expansive company that is 24/7, 365 days a year in the hockey industry. So it's a great, it's a great organization to be involved with if you're a hockey guy, because there's a bigger picture as opposed to just worrying about junior hockey with Youngstown or junior hockey with Maryland. We're worried about the entire product and our entire corporation to make sure that we're doing our very best to try to kind of have a vertical integration of what we're trying to do and bringing people into our structure, I guess, that are all involved across the board with Black Bear.
How does it balance out, knowing I think you're the only company, a USHL and all present? How does that work? And do you have to, you kind of, like in the finance world, you have to keep a Chinese veil between investment? Do you guys have to kind of have a Chinese wall up there between the two organizations?
To some extent, yes. I think in our eyes, we look at both of them as independent, independent teams, independent organizations, but we also understand fully that we're doing everything in our power to try to integrate the two together when it makes sense. They're two different leagues. They operate by two different sets of rules, so it's not as if it's a farm club for us, one way or the other.
Right.
It's more of an independent club in a different league that we obviously own and have a relationship with. And when we have the ability to utilize one of those junior programs for the best interest of a player, we're always going to try to do that as best as we can, because we obviously have open lines of communication, and I think we have a very common belief in how we want to develop players and move players along the spectrum of junior hockey. So it's a great perk to have, but they definitely are separate of one another. There's really no way to really link them, because they're both in two different leagues and obviously follow a completely a different set of guidelines.
So as you're doing this, you still haven't pulled out of being a youth coach and coaching in the HPHL. I have to always check year by year to see where you're at, because it's Detroit, it's Lemmings. You never know where players are at or where coaches are at till spring or summer. You start figuring out who's who where. So you're back at Little Caesar, or first time at Little Caesar, or is it second year?
This will be my second year at Little Caesars.
Okay,
So
15?
I'll be 16s this year. I did the 15s last year.
16s at Little Caesars. You've had your hands in the youth hockey market in Detroit for quite a few years now. What's changed in the Detroit market, or what hasn't changed since you were there? Because you've been living there now for what? Yeah, you're in your 40s now, so you've had a good experience in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I started coaching when I was 28 years old in Detroit, so I think I'm going into my 17th year now coaching. It's dramatically different today. I can tell you that. More and more rules and things that you have to abide by and follow. It's a unique market here in Detroit. It's a bit of a hornet's nest at times, but I think all in all, I mean, the market is one of the best markets in the country. Obviously, we produce a lot of great players and talented players that come through the different Tier 1 programs here in Michigan. We're very fortunate. We have a lot of really good programs here for our players to go through and develop at.
Yep.
I have a lot of great coaches here in Detroit as well, so it's a pretty good market still. But again, maybe a different conversation over a beer sometimes, and we can talk about some of the rules and the hurdles that we face on a day-to-day basis as well.
It wasn't the purpose of the call is to try to find a way to bang on Detroit, but Detroit's interesting because of the amount of Tier 1 hockey that's played there and a uniqueness in the two different brands. In fact, three. You could say you've got HPHL, you got Tier 1, and you've got some independent teams too. And they all kind of march to a little bit different drummer. What I think is unique, and maybe you could kind of help with a little bit, is you've been a guy that's your teams have never shied away from the OHL or the major junior side as they come up through 16s. Now, there's always going to be a debate. Well, maybe not so more with this NIL and things the way they're changing. It might not be an issue anymore, but there's always been a debate up until now on the direction. You seem to have a fairly sizable amount compared to other Detroit teams of guys that go that way. Is that by chance or is that by
I'd say it's by chance, to be honest with you. I think we've been fortunate. We've had a lot of good players come through the programs, and back when I was coaching 16 and under, I was a big believer, as we are even in Youngstown to this day. Like, we're less concerned about age and more concerned about projectability and talent level and skill set. So I was very involved with bringing on a ton of underage players playing up at the 16U level. So your typical 15U player nowadays that would skip 15U and go play 16U with the older players. So when you're coaching, a collection of really, really high-end players, those kids typically have various options that are available to them. And, every kid's a little bit different in terms of what they're looking to accomplish with hockey or what they're looking to accomplish with life. So I would say the vast majority of guys that we've coached, even the elite of the elite through our programs are typically going the Division I route. But we do have quite a few kids that have come through the program and have chosen the CHL route as well. But like I said, no real rhyme or reason to it. With me being a college guy, I'd like to have every player go to school. I think education is something you can never take away from someone. And you look at the NHL draft picks year by year over the last 8 years, and number of players that are coming out of college hockey to play in the NHL or free agents signing the National Hockey League, or guys playing in the American Hockey League, and those numbers continue to shift more and more every season with the Division I level, which is excellent. But obviously the OHL and the CHL in general is a grade 3 leagues that they have there too, and also different options for different kids.
I would argue that the talent's always been there at the college level. We're just finally seeing some retirement and death in the NHL, and then as that shifts to more guys that are exposed to the American, just giving more opportunities. Now, that's, once again, opinion and debatable, but from my view, that's the way I see it. I think there's always been a great college game, but just never been trusted by the NHL until 8-10 years here.
Well, there has been, and honestly, it's, opinion-wise, sure, it's definitely debatable, but numbers are numbers, right? And we've started to go down the road of independent studies, really to analyze these numbers and show people the realities and the facts behind it. And the numbers are shifting, and it's at a staggering rate. And you're starting to see more and more kids, even elite level, high end, Canadian kids that are looking at the college path and looking at the United States hockey.
Getting back to the 16 model, Detroit, you got 3 different houses. What's the appeal of, or do you see pluses and minuses with the independent model, the HPHL model, and the Tier 1?
Yeah, I think they're all good in their own way, and so they'll probably draw some negatives as well. Like when you look at Caesars, for example, we used to be a part of the HPHL. We've now separated. Several years back, Caesars moved in a different direction, so we've gone to an independent schedule. It's amazing for flexibility. It's amazing for scheduling because you can schedule whomever you want, whenever you want. Outside of we have to play like a league schedule within like all the Tier 1 teams in Michigan. But outside of that, I mean, we have flexibility to play anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's nice because you really can maximize every single weekend. And our biggest goal is to prepare kids for the United States Hockey League or prepare them for their next steps in junior hockey. And in order to do that, competition it's non-negotiable, right? These kids have to play in an environment where every time they touch the ice, they're being pushed and they're being challenged, and they're finding ways to fail because that's when you get better. And they're also figuring out ways to jump over obstacles and through hurdles to make sure that they're in a good spot moving into junior hockey. So the independent route's great, but reality is hockey's not cheap, right? So the more you travel, the more cost goes up, and that's something that we have to be aware of consistently with the independent avenue because you travel a little bit more. The leagues in general, like I've never been a big league guy. I just think it's really hard from a parity standpoint from sport minor all the way up to U18 hockey to have all the exact same organizations in a league and expect it to be competitive across the board every time you play. So sometimes I think that could be a drawback of a league structure as you get some games that are good, but you get a lot of games that maybe aren't as competitive as you would like, which I think stunts growth and stunts development. But I think from just an organizational structure, you have more power, more buying power essentially because you got more teams involved, and then obviously it's less travel because you kind of get the bulk of your games in different regions where you're playing 5 games in a weekend or whatnot. So there's definitely positives on both sides. Like myself, last year was my first year on the independent side. I think I would prefer to do that, but it is something again that from a cost perspective, it does definitely increase the cost a little bit.
It's interesting because you go back 10, 12 years in the game, it was almost impossible to run an independent team on the competitive level because the leagues had so much more of a say, both in their district and with USA Hockey, and they almost, aced you out. And nowadays, there's more of an opportunity because you communicate with more teams. More teams want to have that flexibility. You got these the hybrid teams on the East Coast, especially on the East Coast, that are really prep players that are just filling in before their season starts. Yeah, you see a lot of teams ramping up and getting 10 games in with all those. Get to the Midwest, you got the Shaddocks of the world, and now the North Star Christian. It's a different world out there. I mean, it's a different world. It's 16 and 18 hockey, and I don't know where it's going. I'd like to hear your thoughts on where you see this evolving to. Are we ever going to separate these? I want that answered, but I also want to throw this question out too. Are we ever going to separate out the Shaddocks and the Mount St. Charles and the North Star Christians? Are we ever going to separate them out where they're playing, purely what they are, which is prep schools?
Honestly, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I think these questions can probably be answered with the same answer or similar answer. I look at the future of youth hockey, and I think the academy model, whatever definition you want to put that under, whether it be a Mount St. Charles or a Shattuck or a BK Selects, or just hockey academies, that have maybe an independent structure but have a team model that are tied to them like a TPH. I do think that that's probably the direction we're heading in at the 14, 15, 16, 18 level. I think to a large degree, I think it's a great thing. And again, there's two sides to every story, but I think, if you're an elite level hockey player at 15, 16 years old, you've kind of gotten through the multi-sport stuff where you've been a, dual sport athlete, and you've continued to play baseball, soccer, other sports, but you kind of got to get to that area at 15, 16, 17 where you need to start choosing which path you really want to go down and specialize in, which I think the academy model does a great job with that because you have the elite athletes that are ready to specialize. I think, again, with an independent scheduling structure, it's great from a competition level. You can pick and choose whom you play against and when you play them and where you play them, which I think is excellent. The one thing I'd love to see, I don't know if it'll ever get to this, I think from a revenue standpoint, it would impact people negatively. Probably to a degree that they would never go down this road, but, I truly think we need U15, U17. I think that's the in my opinion, the absolute best path for development. And what we see even at a 16U level is we have a lot of kids that are now scared to play 16U hockey because they think they need to play junior hockey, right? Whereas if you're playing up against 17-year-olds when you're 16, I think we could probably salvage and save more players from making mistakes when they're too young. Because we have too many players playing junior hockey that just, to be quite frank, they're just not ready to play junior hockey. And we have this mindset that we have to play junior hockey at 16 years old. And, I have an old friend of mine that was a coach at Miami, Nick Petraglia, and we used to have these conversations long ago when I was 28, 29, 30 years old, sitting in Taylor Sportsplex stands at state playoffs talking to Nick. But we would always talk about our younger players, and I would ask him the question on, where should these kids go? Like, what's the right path? And his answer to me was, they're 16, does it? They should be playing 16U. They're not 18, 19, 20 years old. They don't have to go to that level in order to develop. They don't have to go to that level in order, to succeed. So I think that U15, U17 model would probably put things back in place where kids play their own birth year up to 15s, and then they can play up a year with the 17Us, which I think would be great from a competition standpoint and development standpoint. And I think it would save a whole lot of kids who make decisions to go play junior hockey when they're just not quite ready. And typically that 1 year really is, in my opinion, I've had this conversation with a lot of friends. Like I have two sons now, a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old, and who knows where they're going to be in hockey. But if they're ever talented, like the kids that I'm coaching and in a position like some of these boys, I've always told people I will not allow them to make that choice until they're 17 years old. I think 17 is the time when they've had enough experience doing it. They've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think that one extra year post-draft gives them the ability to really analyze their path. And, 15 years old to 16 years old is a huge, huge jump, just from a physical aspect and a mental aspect. But I think kids put themselves in a position to make much, much better decisions for the long term.
Absolutely.
That's why I'd be a huge, huge advocate for 15s and 17s. And I know my 18U and prep friends wouldn't appreciate that, but in my heart of hearts, I think that's the absolute best thing for development for our young hockey players.
It's interesting because it's a model that over the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's come up a few times. It's come up where, even to a U19, U17, U15 model instead of U18, U16, the girls have identified that in their game and changed it to a U19 model. It's interesting to see if it will ever come to that. I would be a fan of that. I think that would work well good. You mentioned something though that I think is important because I want to take a layer off of this. You mentioned Miami, 4-year player there, unique in the fact that you wore a letter 3 of your 4 years. There can't be too many guys at Miami have ever done that. Has there been any other players that have done that?
I think there's been a couple, but I was full disclosure. I actually had 5 years there because I blew my knee out 1 year, so I had a medical
that doesn't count.
shit year.
You still got 3 years on the letter.
For sure. So yeah, I was one of a few 3-year captains at Miami. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head the names of the others, but that shows you that I've aged a little bit because I used to know who they were. But over the years, the dementia's kicked in a little bit. But there's been several guys that have been in that club with being a captain for 3 years there.
What is it in the water in Ohio with coaching? And I say that because in my world, I seem to think that Miami and Bowling Green both just kick out a ton of people that end up in the coaching. Is that something that is kind of, do you recognize that as an alum from there? Is that something that there's more of a reality to it than just me saying it, or am I just full of crap?
No, I think there's a reality to it. Yeah, I think there's a reality to it. I mean, Miami's got the coach's cradle nickname, right, for all the coaches that have come through the football program there and
Woody
our
Hayes,
various coaching programs.
Bo Schembeck.
Yeah, exactly. But tons of them, right? Tons of great guys that have come through. So I do think that there's a little bit of that, but I also think, I'm a big believer in your coaching tree and who you've worked with and worked for. And to me, when you go through and you look back, the coaches that have come through Miami have had a lot of great coaches and hockey guys that have been with the program, and then all these other guys that have learned from them. And those guys tend to turn out to be great coaches on their own from all their experience, working with, guys like Coach Bergeron or, guys like Joe Chwazdecki, who obviously had a pretty renowned career coaching at Miami and beyond at Denver. So oftentimes, birds of a feather, right? They all kind of seem to learn together, and then those guys expand their wings and move on and do great things. So you're 100% right. And I do think that you look at it, right? I mean, BG kind of took some of the Miami guys, and those guys went back to Miami, and a lot of great guys coming from the same coaching tree or similar coaching trees.
If there's one guy that you've modeled your coaching after, who has it been?
You know what? That's a great question. I would tell you, I played for a guy named Peter Horacek when I was in the minors and coached the NHL for a little bit and minor pro hockey for a long time, and extremely passionate, extremely caring about his players, but hard on them, wanting to hold them accountable, but also, giving them a hug when they need it. He was a great coach that I played for. I played for a guy named Paul Gillis as well in the minors that I absolutely loved. Gilly, my favorite coach probably I've ever played for in my life, and he was more of a player's coach, but I've kind of tried to blend, those two worlds together and kind of create my own little thing as well as a coach, but somebody that, obviously can be a player's coach when needed, but also understands that there's a time and a place that we got to push and lean in our guys and expect more of them. So, but those were two great coaches that I played for and was very lucky to be around.
So it's interesting because you've only recently jumped to this level. How do you jump from the path you were on, which, believe it or not, most people don't understand that there's guys in the Detroit market, maybe some in the Toronto market, and a couple other markets, that can be career youth coaches and make a living at. You jump from here to here. I didn't see it. What was the connection there? And that's a leap that, from my perspective, that's a leap that looks like it's kind of, boy, oh boy, I've got to get up to speed quick on what it's like to be a GM in the USHL. Was there a little of that, or did you feel like you had your feet on the ground when you started?
I think looking back, I mean, if you really look back, when I started coaching, I was 28. I strictly coached, and I was coaching an independent, low-end Tier 1 program. We were called the Detroit Falcons, and that was my first kind of cut my teeth and learn how to coach. And I worked with a guy named Brian Felser.
I remember those days.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's long ago, right? But I worked with a guy, Brian Felser, there, who I'm actually coaching with this year at Little Caesars. We've been buddies for a long time. So learned a ton from him and did that. But as I got going in coaching, I was a volunteer scout for the Port Huron Fighting Falcons their first and second year in the North American League way back in, this had to be 2010-ish, 2011, something like that, when they came around. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I worked in Sarnia as well, kind of on a volunteer basis there, scouting the Ontario Hockey League. And then I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity with the Maryland Black Bears, who are owned by Black Bear Sports Group, with a gentleman by the name of Clint Milmock. I've been coaching while I've been trying to figure out, do I want to coach? Is this something I really want to pursue at a higher level from a coaching standpoint, or do I love the scouting piece? Do I love the building of teams pieces? The personnel side. And I think for me, as I've really evolved in hockey, the one thing that I've learned is my passion truly is player evaluation, player acquisition, and then building teams. And that to me is what I really, really enjoy. It's something I can do all day long, every day. I absolutely love coaching, truly. But a smart guy once told me that you're hired to be fired. So as a coach, and that's something where, I just don't really have a desire to I don't want to move all across the country 15 times chasing the dream so that I can either hopefully hit, but maybe I don't hit, and my family's life is very, very different. So I look more towards the path of the management side. And I was lucky after, working in Maryland. I had done a little bit of scouting for Dave Wilkie with Omaha before that. Dave called me back and offered me the assistant GM job in Omaha. So I was with him for a couple of years there as the AGM. Learned a ton from Wilkes and Kirky Ludicky, who's now the GM, or assistant GM in Green Bay. David Nyes is in Tri-City, and Holden St. Clair actually just won the Clark Cup in Sioux City. So we had a great staff in Omaha that was, it was a lot of learning. Definitely that was like baptism by fire, but learned a lot, kind of got an understanding of what our league was about there. And then, stepping into Youngstown when you're the one that's responsible to make sure that things are getting done and they're getting done the right way, and you're obviously trying to build the team in the process and manage a group of, we have 11 scouts now, including our AGMs all across the country, and we have our coaching staff that we're managing, but we're also involved, on a day-to-day basis with the operational side, right? Like, how are things going at our deep freeze practice facility? We just literally built a $100,000 strength and conditioning facility in our practice facility. So, we're tracking rubber flooring that's coming in
Right.
for the players, right? So there's a lot of moving parts to, to this position. And it was definitely a little bit was learning on the fly, but again, thankfully for me, I think I had a great path where I learned from a lot of really great people that taught me.
You've got to update your EP page, because all that I was probably only aware of about 50% of what you just talked about.
Yeah, I don't get super concerned about my EP page. So
you don't have to be now. 10 years ago,
No,
you did, but
I probably did then, yeah. But I've actually been around the management side and the scouting side for a long time. I've just been doing it, while I've been coaching, and it's actually been great, to be honest with you. It's kind of coming to an end here. This will be my last year coaching midget hockey, just because I have too many other things, on the fire right now, and I really need to focus my time on Youngstown. But kind of seeing the development path of players and being a coach for them, I learned so much doing that applies to what I do right now. So it's been a great experience for the last 17 years, and very thankful for where I'm at right now.
I tell you, you hit on something. 7 years ago when I sold the 2 junior teams that I owned, I kind of sat back for a year and just kind of looked around, maybe 2 years, and decided I didn't really want to get back into the coaching side again because of the same reasons. I would much rather build relationships with players, help them get on path, watch them, evaluate them. I think that's the part of the game that gets lost by so many people that poke at junior hockey from the outside. I also think that's the hardest thing ego-wise to be able to walk away from. I think that if you're a coach, there's an ego that comes around with being a coach, and that's hard to set aside when you decide to step away from coaching. Do you see that way too?
For sure. I mean, going back to what we had talked about earlier with the separation of state between GM and head coach, right, and staff. I have my own ideas. I've coached for 17 years and, played hockey at a reasonably high level. So, I study a lot of hockey. I'm trying to learn new things all the time. And I feel like I'm pretty cutting edge with the approach that I take as a coach. But, it's not easy to step away from something when you feel good about what you're doing. And, as a coach, again, there is a little bit of ego there where, you've had the ability to kind of pull the strings and make the choices and change your forecheck because you see something that another team's doing. And, it's very different as a manager, right? Stepping aside and, watching something. And again, it's easy to be the armchair quarterback on Monday, right? So trying to separate those two things and really understand that we're looking at it from a completely different lens when we're sitting in the stands, when we're watching on, hockey TV, than what that coach is looking at when he's on the bench in Dubuque and things aren't going well. So it really is. It's hard. It's going to be tough. I know in 8 or 9 months here when I step away, my wife keeps telling me there's no chance you're going to do it, but I've promised her and my colleagues that I will. But I know it's going to be hard to step away from the coaching side. But I'm definitely excited about the management side, and that's where my passion is. So I'll be just fine. I'll figure it out.
Are you gonna coach the children, or have you been coaching the children?
Yeah, I just push pucks though. So we have head coaches for both teams, and I really don't. I've never wanted to be my kids' coaches. I want to be their dad. And that's the thing for me that again, can be hard sometimes because I have coached and work in hockey, obviously, so I have some things that maybe they're not doing that I see that I want to tell them about. But I don't have a desire to be their head coach. I'll just push pucks for as long as somebody allows me to, and then at some point I'll have to stand on the glass and drink coffee, and hopefully by then they're where they need to be and they can stand on their own 2 feet.
What do you do when Jason Deskins is the type of person that's coaching your kids? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It depends on the kid.
No, your kids. If they run across, if your clone is coaching them, do you look at that as a good or a bad?
I love it. I love it. I want. There's nothing more than I want for my 2 boys to be held accountable and to be pushed. And if their coach feels like they have more in them, getting into them a little bit and bringing it out of them. As long as you're doing it from the right place, as long as you care about them, there's nothing more I would rather have for a coach for my 2 boys. That's for sure.
Can you be an old school coach, in your opinion, in today's market with the players that are coming up through 15 and 16 on through June?
No.
Okay. Why?
No, I don't. I don't think it's. Well, listen, you can be whatever you choose to be, right? But you're not going to have, if you want to have elite players, it's very rare in today's sports world, I would say, not even just the hockey world, but it's extremely rare that you have parents that have the ability to allow somebody to not only coach their kid, but discipline their kid. It's something that we've struggled with, I think, as a society. It's just my honest opinion. Like, my kids, for example, if they do something wrong, I would expect my neighbor or the person across the street or their teacher, I would fully expect them to pull them aside and discipline them and make sure that they understood that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. There just aren't that many people nowadays. We live in a different world. I think parenting has changed dramatically. I think it goes to kind of, maybe some people have probably seen the quote, right? Like, kids haven't changed, parents have. How we raised them has. And I truly believe that. I think parents have, we've enabled our kids to get away with mediocrity because we don't want other people to tell them what their faults are and to try to fix it. So I think old school coaches will struggle. I think kids nowadays, they're built differently. They need to see things. They need to understand why you're doing everything you're doing, like everything you're doing. And I'm not going to lie, it's challenging for me sometimes as a coach who comes from a completely different lens. And the way I was raised and the coaches that I love to play for, like I loved playing for, to be quite honest, guys that were hard, guys that were on me, guys that pushed me. Those are the coaches I really enjoyed. So it can be challenging at times with kids nowadays because they really are very different in how they learn. That part of it, I don't think is the hard part, but it's the inability sometimes, I think, if you are an old school coach, to be able to push them and push them and push them and push them, because I don't think kids handle it the same way that they used to handle it. So, that's just my honest opinion. I think there's a way to balance those 2 things out. I don't think everybody needs to be a player's coach that, everything's fun and games and cupcakes and roses. But I do think that it's more and more challenging nowadays. Geez, Pete's, like, you look at the regulations that we're following, with sport, I just did my, some of my, admin things that I had to complete as a coach, and I'm literally watching these videos and I'm like, this is insanity, you have to be able to coach, you have to be able to teach, and there's going to be times you have to be hard on players because sometimes players show up and they don't give you their best. And that's your job as a coach to find a way to bring that out of them. So, me personally, like, I would love it if my kids had that kind of a guy. I don't think it would be super successful with the vast majority of people nowadays, unfortunately, just because I think we have completely different expectations, for our kids and how they're coached and pushed.
I think that's probably the most candid answer I've heard. I love it. Taking the time to give us your opinion on that. Tell me a little bit about the parents in the last 17 years of your coaching. How has that relationship changed, and how much that translates over into the USHL? People always go, when you get to juniors, parents don't matter anymore. I don't believe that. I've seen lots of kids get traded or cut because of their parents and their parents' involvement over the years. what are your thoughts on that? How's the parent? You answered a lot of it already, but how's the parent involved and where do they fit in now?
I mean, parents are involved. Like, we don't have a ton of conversations with parents, right? I mean, it's not like we're on the phone every day with one of our junior players' parents to talk about our power play or ice time. Like that. That really doesn't happen much. I mean, I would tell you, there's the odd phone call that you'll get that you scratch your head at, and it's a parent that doesn't understand. But I think the biggest thing, with us in general, and I said this on a different podcast before that I was on, you're recruiting the family. Like, unfortunately, like when you draft a kid, you're getting everybody, right? Like, you're getting the mom, the dad, you're getting the brothers, the sisters, you're getting the baggage that comes with that family, regardless of whether or not the kid is doing those things, right? So if you have a parent that is overbearing, if you have a parent that questions everything that the coaches do, or questions everything that the GMs do, or question, his teammates, or bitch and moan about ice time, or complain about, this guy, he stinks and I can't get it. You can't play with him because you can't get a pass on your tape. That all comes down to the kid, right? So every single day, whether we talk to the parent or not, we're dealing with the parent's baggage in either a really, really good way or a really, really bad way.
Let me jump in that, dig into that a little bit. Juxtapose that to your U15s or U16s now. Mm-hmm. How much of that conversation, you got USHL guys all over you with that team and the level you're coaching at. You've got people watching from the development program to the OHL. How much of that is shared, not by just you, but by a 16 coach this day? How much of that is like, hey, the kid's great, but you might have some baggage that's coming along with him? Does that get shared as much as people? You hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, the parents, you don't want a bad parent." Does that get shared with the talent you're dealing with?
I would tell you, I mean, being candid with you, I would tell you no. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think most coaches look at it and go, well, I got a good player. The kid's good. It's like, well, that's great, but he's a losing player because he's not good with his teammates. He doesn't play well in structure. He's not a good teammate. He has bad body language. He's uncoachable. And I'll tell you, 17 years ago when I first got into coaching, I looked at it completely different, right? I was more along the lines of that, where it was like, well, this kid's a great player. I'll deal with that baggage that comes with it. I try not to now. We try to avoid it at all costs. And I think at the midget level, I would tell you that there are guys out there that, if the kid's got, parents that are a little bit out there, they'll avoid it. But I would tell you all in all, most guys, the only thing they're worried about is trying to win, right? Like win, and if we're good.
I fully agree with you on that. I wasn't trying to pry you into a direction because we just did our Sunday night podcast, and or a week ago Sunday, and the question came up about parents, and I said, look, talent supersedes whatever a parent does. The higher you go in the game, there's some guys that have got some crazy parents in the NHL. Just crazy. I had a player that used to play for me that, as a rookie, stepped into St. Louis, and his dad pulled Keenan aside after the practice and tried to tell him what to do on the power play. First week on the team, they're crazy doesn't stop at youth hockey, But the parent is. I don't think it. I think you'll overlook a lot of things if there's talent there and it can be developed. Because the idea is to win. It's not to have a Boy Scout troop where everybody's trying to earn badges. It's about winning hockey games.
Yeah, and you got to figure out a balancing act, right? I mean, it's one thing if you have some things that you got to address and you got to fix, and you have people that are willing to look in the mirror and change things. It's another thing if you have people that obviously are going to be divisive amongst your group, right? And that's what you have to figure out as a coach or as a GM, whether you're at the 15U level, 16U level, or the USHL or the National Hockey League, to be honest with you, because, at that level, it's a little bit different, right? I mean, it's their profession. They're there every single day to show up, and, if they don't do their job, they don't have a job, right? So it's a little different there, but I think even in the USHL, like for us, we're careful, right? And we do a lot of legwork and due diligence on families, and we understand history, we understand track record, we understand what they were involved with in squirts and peewees and midget hockey and bantam hockey, and the type of demeanor that they bring to the rink every day. Because I hate to say it, but at some point that's going to rub off on the kid. And it's going to be a lot of who he is as a person, or who she is as a person down the road. And I think the reality is like, you got to be careful to balance out, okay, how much can we win with this player? And how much of a negative is this player in terms of impeding our ability to get to where we want to go because of all the excess baggage.
I would contend that sometimes having that one guy in the locker room brings the locker room together. I don't think you can have 2 or 3 or 4 guys like that, but sometimes that one guy in the locker room that's kind of your black sheep, your rebel, your troubled kid, circles the wagons. It gets the team to kind of bond a little bit, and they work to try to deal with the problem. They as a group can become a better group and pull him in, not to ostracize him, but to actually work around. And so sometimes that one bad is actually a good thing for a locker room. I've never seen success myself when you load the whole locker room up with it.
Well, it's hard though.
In his early career, Bob Probert was phenomenal for that group because it taught their guys how to be leaders. It taught those guys how to deal with adversity. It came a little much later, but at first, you hear interviews with those guys, and they became a better family and they became a better team, the Red Wings, because of him, in spite of what his bad side, and then it just got to the point where it went overboard. But my only point there was that sometimes it's not a bad thing.
No, and then there are different. It's funny because there are kids that they're great kids. They might not make the right decision all the time, but they're awesome kids. And then there are kids that sometimes they're just not great kids. They're not great teammates, right? So it's that balancing act, right? Like you can handle a kid who makes mistakes and sometimes does something that isn't great or is a bonehead and makes poor choices away from the rink, as long as he's a good kid and a good teammate. And, he understands when he makes a mistake that he's got to fix it, right? So, those are the things that I think we're all trying to balance out every day. And like you said, you can't have 25 Boy Scouts either, right? Sometimes when you have elite players, so some of what makes them elite is the fact that they got a little bit of charisma and swagger to them and confidence. And to be quite honest, sometimes arrogance. It's all about how much you can handle in your locker room and what type of staff do you have, what type of team do you have, how's your leadership group, and all those things come into play when you got those types of kids.
So, as you know, this whole podcast is about the process, how to ascend from youth up into juniors, and from juniors to college. If Jason Deskins had the ability to talk to the whole audience, I think we got 30,000 people listening now. What's the one thing, or is there one thing you could kind of give for advice to help that process, besides the obligatory, work hard? I mean, everybody says that. But is there one thing that you could pull out that might be off the beaten path that will help people understand or get through this process?
Yeah, you know what? I think they're probably intertwined to some degree, but I mean, 2 things that come to my mind. Number one, he who works the longest typically has the most success. It's a long path. It really is. And the biggest thing that parents don't realize is longevity in work ethic, right? Like, every year you're going to face hurdles, right? You're going to be, undersized, and you're going to have people doubt you. And the reality is the kids who keep working and pushing and pushing and pushing year to year and don't get deterred by, hey, so-and-so committed somewhere. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with your path. Those kids who have that longevity in their work ethic tend to pass people. And I think the other thing is you just stop worrying about other people. It's not about other people's kids. It's not about this kid got a scholarship or this kid got drafted. None of that stuff matters, unfortunately. And I hate to say it. I mean, we've had these conversations before with people where it's almost a curse in some ways when you see these kids get these early commitments or get drafted, in the Phase 1 draft or in the Ontario Hockey League draft, because sometimes they think, hey, I made it, right? And I hate to say it, but the reality is when you look at the success rates of drafts, they're typically not very high. When you look at, I think, the USHL 2 years ago, I haven't done the numbers this year, but we'll find out soon. But 2 years ago, I think it was 29% in Phase 2 was the actual hit rate for a draft pick, right? So 71% of those players never played in our league. And that goes for the NHL, it goes for the USHL, the OHL, right? So don't worry about other people. worry about yourself, worry about your kid. Don't get tied up in all the BS across the hockey arenas and the drama across the rinks. And follow the right people. Follow people who are going to make your kid accountable. Follow people who are going to push him beyond belief to a level that he or you never thought he could be pushed to. Stick with those types of people as long as you can, because the one thing I can tell you doing this in the junior hockey world, there's a pattern of success with players that come from certain people, that they always tend to be more prepared and more ready. And oftentimes it's not the people that you would necessarily think, or what I think the 30,000 viewers would maybe perceive as the best for development. You got to find the right people, and you got to stick with those people because their players tend to figure things out.
Is there a benchmark that you guys look at inside the league? And I don't need to know who it is, but do you have that benchmark program where you're going, we've got a GM like them, we've got a coach like them, we've got to have a facility like them, where you're kind of modeling after what you see that is successful in the league?
I would say we're probably picking and choosing a couple different programs. Like, listen, I don't think it's any secret right now the Chicago Steel have done an exceptional job developing players and putting together teams that have success, right, and moving kids on to higher levels, whether it be to Division I college hockey or to the National Hockey League through the draft. That's a huge barometer, I think, for us. Like, when we look at it, like, we definitely have parts of the Chicago Steel that we would like to emulate and figure out a way to be as good as they are at that. And I would tell you right now, we still have a long way to go because they've earned that, with where they're at currently. But I think the biggest thing, like, we want to be us. We're going to be different. We'll have things that we'll pull from different programs that we like and steal ideas for sure. But we want to be authentic. We want to be organic. We want to have a program where we have people who every single day they show up and they give their very best. And we're not concerned about, I think, a lot of the same things maybe that other programs are concerned about. I think when you look at my path or Ryan Kosecki's path or our new head coach Ryan Ward's path, Ryan Ward, he's never been a head coach before. He came out of youth hockey, he coached 13U last year at Windy City, and Ryan Kosecki has coached, through Fox Motors and Meyer growing up, and he's never been a GM in the league before, and I was never handed anything in a GM capacity. I earned everything I got, and I think that's something for us. I think we're less concerned maybe than other teams about where this guy's coached at this level, or he was in the NHL, and those are all great things. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's wonderful, but I think for us, like, we wake up every day and our group gets on our morning calls, and we all have the same drive and passion and care meter, to make this the best program possible. So I look less at kind of that aspect and more on, how does this person, do they love hockey? Are they immersed in this? Do they give 100% every time they come to the rink? Do they want to be great? Are they willing to sacrifice certain things to be the very best versions of ourselves? Because I can tell you there's a lot of things that we're going to have to sacrifice if we want to become, a team that, rivals the Chicago Steel or, the other elite programs within, the USHL, obviously. So, to answer your question, we definitely have things that we pick and choose, but I think all in all, we're trying to be as authentic as we can be, and we're just a group of guys that have really been handed nothing throughout this process of getting to where we're at, and I think we're all kind of motivated to prove to people that we're going to build this thing into what we think it can be.
Jason, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
I appreciate it.